Okay. All right, so welcome. Thanks very much. So tonight we're going to talk about all things remote ID. Hi, Andrew and Mike, who I obviously know really well. And then David is going to help us out at some stage. And the flow is, if you want to interject at any stage because you have more information than me and you want to add a little bit of flavor, that's fine by me, but we're going to just talk about all things remote ID. So the agenda is latest news. What is remote ID? How do I fly legally? Okay, let me see. Got to get other people in too. Okay. The tools that are out there, a couple of remote ID implementations in the next month. I'm going to do the PX4 simulators because I'm going to do a dry run for the PX4 conference. I'm going to get off this in a second because the slide is starting to make me sick. I was saying earlier, I asked my designer to make the slides because usually I'm really vanilla white and black and that's about it. And his direction was just don't make them look like what Godfrey makes them look like. So he kind of went a bit overboard. I think he was making fun of me. Apologies to anybody who's not in the US because remote ID really only applies in the US. So I think this is the most US-centric meetup we've done. This is probably I think it's our 16th or 18th meetup. All of the old stuff is on YouTube. So if you go look at the Reached YouTube link, then you can see what's going on. So remote ID for OEMs comes into force on September 16th, which is this Saturday. There is last week a commercial UAV. There was an FAA keynote that said it may be postponed. I'm honestly thinking it's getting to be a bit too late to be postponed. So I don't know, unless anybody's actually heard anything. I don't know how that's going to happen. But it's the FAA; they can do what they want. So all of the stuff that I'm talking about tonight, I'm just assuming it's going to happen on September 16th. So really, what I want to do is just talk a little bit about what remote ID is. Talk about the different flavors of what you can do to make sure that you're compliant. Then, go through some of the code that we have out there. And, just open it up for discussion. Okay. And all the other legal stuff or whatever, I just don't know. I have no idea. I'm thinking it's going to happen.
This is Dave Messina, Godfrey. It's our view that it is likely to happen because it of course was mandated by Congress to the FAA, and the FAA has gone through the complete rulemaking process. So it's out there as a rule, and so the best they could do is something like an advisory circular, which does not have the force of a rule or a law. And so our anticipation is that they might say something that will affect enforcement in a mild manner, but we anticipate that 16 September, the rule will go into force for operators.
Okay. And then there's a whole big thing about that a lot of people were talking about online, which I'm not really going to go into too much, about whether it's going to be enforced or not. Honestly, when we fly drones, I want to make sure that, so basically what we do is we're a software company that develops mobile apps for drones. We're working with lots of different people. We just signed up our 25th client. Don't want to spam you, but we're doing lots of stuff. And all that I do is I make sure that all my testers and my developers, if they're flying, mostly they don't because they just use the simulators, that they're Part 107, that they have the Part 107 license, and also that we have all the things in the drones, just in case they get stopped by the police and the police, whatever. Got to make sure that all our ducks in a row. So we will make sure that all of our drones on the 16th, we will go in and edit what we need to edit to make sure that they've got that everything's updated on the FAA drone zone. Okay, what else? So commercial UAV, great fun last week. Spent most of it standing at a booth. I did really like the Free Fly Pro Pilot GCS. It's a huge beast. It's kind of expensive, but there's not many GCSs out there other than the HearLink. So it's nice to see that some other things are coming out. The Gremsy Pixie I thought looked really interesting with the new Sony A7R5. I think that's what it's called, camera. I thought that was great. So I'm expecting there to be lots of that combination showing up in US drones soon. And then, like I said, next month, I'm going to do a dry run. Also, there's always an open invitation. I do this every month. I'm usually the one that's talking. We have had people from DJI talk. If anybody ever wants to talk about this, I do not love the sound of my voice all that much, so I'm more than happy to hand it over. So Andrew, if you want to do a dry run before PX4, you're more than welcome to join in, and I'll just shorten mine next week. I think it's pretty short anyway, so I know you're talking to. Okay, so what is remote ID? Well, I guess everybody's basically saying it's a digital license plate. And then I think we need to talk a little bit about why we're doing it. So this is basically going to open up a lot more opportunities that people have been waiting for so long. So if we have a digital license plate, then it's more likely that I think the FAA are going to allow us to do much more of the BVLOS stuff beyond visual line of sight and all sorts of automated missions. And that's, for my business, that's huge. So I really thoroughly behind all this. If there's anything that we can do in order to be able to have, more automated flights or more BVLOS flights, because I think a lot of what's happening in the US on the imagination side, the entrepreneurial side, is severely constrained by the fact that you have to go get a waiver for BVLOS, which in a lot of cases will scare away some of our customers. And then, we're doing work outside of the US purely because of the BVLOS rules. And I'm hoping that this will start to open things up. Okay, so definition, what is it? It's I stole this from lots of different places. In the links, in the notes, I've tried to include all the stuff all the places that I've stolen from. At the end of the talk, I have a bunch of resources for all of the links that I'm going to talk about today. So it's remote identification that allows authorities and the public to identify drones and their operators. So it's not just the authorities that are going to be able to identify you. You can download many of the apps that are out there, such as the Sentinel. We'll go through a whole bunch of them. There's the Open Drone ID. So you can see if a drone's around. You don't necessarily get any pilot information, but the only information that you get is where the controller is for some of the drones. So then the authorities can go over and then investigate where the person is and why they're flying there. Obviously, the reason they're doing this is because they want to make sure that drones are not being used outside stadiums, that they're not being used in wildfires. We've seen all the stuff about people being idiots flying their drones where there's wildfires just to get some good footage, and then putting all sorts of planes in trouble. So that's the last thing that anybody wants to happen. So it's a way of kind of tracking down where the person is for the authorities, physically and then potentially digitally. So the objective is to enhance the accountability and safety. BVLOS or more automation are more likely with remote ID. That's really what I'm after. Doesn't really apply to smaller drones than 250 grams. So if you are not interested, then you can fly the DJI Minis or something that's smaller than that. And then a few years ago, when remote ID came out, there was the broadcast remote ID and the network remote ID. So we're currently only in the broadcast remote ID phase. And the difference is the network remote ID would have a connection to the internet. So we don't have to worry about that at all. That does really interest me because there's a lot of stuff that I'm thinking about, applications that would happen if you had network remote ID, so that you could send the information back to the cloud and do sorts of other stuff. Okay.
May I make a couple comments, Godfrey?
No, Mike said, which is a great point. The DJI Mini 3 does broadcast remote ID, even though it's not required. That's correct. It does. Okay.
May I make a couple comments, Godfrey?
Sure. Yeah.
The first is that, of course, you said it nicely, but the slide implies that remote ID provides identification of the operator. It, of course, provides the identification of a serial number, and it provides the location of both the aircraft and the operator. And it's done differently whether it's done with a module or standard remote ID. If it's standard and integrated into the aircraft, then the location of the pilot or operator is done dynamically on a 1 Hertz basis. If it's for a broadcast module, the operator or ground control station location is synonymous with the takeoff location, and that's where it stays. Can we flip back to that slide?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to it in a second. But what I wanted to do was, okay, yep, shoot.
The the other is that remote ID is required for small UAS under 250 grams if you're operating under Part 107. And so it's keyed to the registration. And so with recreational, absolutely, this bullet is absolutely correct. If you're flying Part 107, you still need remote ID. Also, you need remote ID on a one-on-one basis from a device. If you're going to retrofit your aircraft with a remote ID module, you need one of those for each of your Part 107 aircraft. If you're flying recreationally, you need one remote ID module for your entire fleet. The also very quickly.
Wait, hold on a second there, David. You said you need one remote ID for your entire fleet. What does that mean?
Well, that means you can move the module from aircraft to aircraft if you're flying under 44809 or the recreational exception. So that's a benefit. That's a positive.
That is a benefit, because I just thought that. So here's what the situation that we're in. So we have 50 drones or so. I think that's what we have on the FAA drone zone. That's what our inventory is. I've gotten rid of a lot of them this year on eBay. But there's so most of the new ones, so all of the Mavic 3s. In fact, I do want to show this actually. So this is the list of all the different drones that are, and if you want to find if your drone has firmware that you can do the standard remote ID so that your drone supports it, it's here. So if you want to look, so we did talk about the if we're looking for DJI, yes, the Mini 3 Pro is in here.
And modules are also on this list.
The modules are also on this list. Where are the modules? So the status is accepted. Is that where they are?
No, they're under RID. You have to go search them out.
Yeah, you got back already.
Less than a wonderful listing.
Okay. So if you're flying recreationally, you need one remote ID module for your entire fleet. But if you're doing it under Part 107, you need one per drone.
That's correct, and it goes back to registration, because in recreational, it's you, the operator, who's registered, as opposed to Part 107, where the aircraft is registered.
Okay.
The other point that I wanted to make on that slide was network remote ID. And so we follow very closely the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2023, which draft bills are through the Senate and the House. And this year it's a bi-chamber bill, which is very unusual. But both versions state and mandate to the FAA that they will utilize network remote ID, which depresses us a lot because we're not thrilled about that. We argued hard against it with the notice for public rulemaking back a couple of years ago, but the use of network remote ID is very important to NASA and unmanned traffic management.
So in a nutshell, you're saying that the network ID is coming fast?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, as fast as the FAA institutes rules, but yes.
Yeah, okay. Given that that list. Okay, then the other thing that I wanted to show as well is, which I think is important, is I guess I'll show it in a second. I don't know where I have it off the top of my head. It's on a slide. So there are a list of drones that DJI have that are not currently supported. So they're actually going back quite far. So you can see the Mavic Pro Platinum was rescinded, so they tried to do it, but there's a firmware update that's coming out in December, allegedly, which is going to make the Phantom 4s have standard remote ID, and then some of the Mavic 2 Pros, there's still like a lot of older drones, like the M210 is not supported. Doesn't look like there's any plans to have that supported.
So if you have a drone that was manufactured prior to September 16, 2022, and you would like to be compliant, you can add a broadcast module to it, and it will be it'll be compliant for either recreational or Part 107.
Okay, and I think I was kind of getting to that. So let me do this then. Let's go back to where we were. Okay, so there are three types of remote ID, and this is what kind of David was getting at. So there's the standard remote ID, which that was the list that I was just looking at. So if your drone is in that list of the URL is in the resources at the end of the slides. If it's in that list, then you're good to go. All you have to do is update your firmware, and then just make sure that you update your registration on the FAA drone zone. That's by far the cheapest way to do it. You've basically been taken care of. I did tons of searches. There are quite a few UAS drones in there. So there's Teal drones in there. There's Bobby Watts drones in there, Prisms, all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot in there. So the DJI, the Autel, the Parrots, all the ones that you would expect are there. And then if you're not in there, or if you've got like your own custom drone, because we make a lot of custom drones too as well with PX4 and Pixhawk, then there are some options there too as well. But you're probably in the second category, which is the drones with remote ID broadcast module. They have slightly different, let me see. So with the standard remote ID, and David did say this a bit earlier, it's broadcasting by Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, the drone ID. So that's the remote ID serial number, the drone location altitude, drone velocity, the control station location elevation, the time mark, and if there's an emergency status, if there's something wrong with the battery or it's crashing, it's going to send that out.
There are two differences between standard remote ID and the broadcast module. The first is that standard remote ID broadcasts a dynamic location of the ground control station on a 1 Hertz. And the second is that if the remote ID subsystem fails on a power-up self-test, it forces the drone not to take off. And both of those are different from the broadcast module. There is no interconnection between the flight controller and the broadcast module. And as I mentioned earlier, the location is the takeoff location, and that's static throughout the flight.
Yep, and it's important to say that because by and large, broadcast modules don't connect to the drone at all. So basically, it's just something that's velcroed on the side or zip tied on the side. So very different kind of operation. There is a third category, which is kind of a bit, I think it's called a FRIA, which is a FAA recognized identification area. And that's kind of schools, colleges, and then community-based organizations, CBOs. So there is a list, again, I think there's 230 that I found on the FAA's website. A link is there. But basically, it's a much more of a controlled environment so that there's not much chance of something going wrong. So if something does go wrong, you're within a college anyway, so they're not that worried about it.
Yeah, we projected that if you have one FRIA for every 20 UAS operators, you would require 79,000 FRIAs.
Wow.
The FAA is anticipating that the total number that they will approve is 4,000. So
yeah, it looks like it's in the 200s at the moment, though.
Yes, so that's absolutely correct.
Okay. So how's it going to be used? Well, it's going to be used by the general public. It's going to be used by law enforcement, with air traffic control. So you can see how this would fit into kind of an ADSB type world where UTMs would be able to potentially pick up the remote ID broadcast and be able to tell where drones were, and you have kind of like the beginnings of air traffic control for drones. So it just basically gives everybody better awareness.
And if I can amend that, that's the right-hand side of that slide is a good aspirational description for unmanned traffic management today and this year. And in the near term, air traffic control will not monitor any broadcast remote ID signals, and they emphatically do not want anything to do with small UAS.
Yep, but we have somebody from Airspace Link on today, which is a UTM. So I wonder what plans they have to use remote ID.
Yeah, and that's why they want network. Absolutely.
Yep. And then, so how does it work? So basically, you have static data and dynamic data. So the things that we talked about that's going to send out. So it's got your registration number, and then it's going to send out that long a vector, and it's continue to send those out over a period of time. I was quite surprised because when we started getting involved with this, because we were doing some work with one of our clients, and somebody was explaining to me how this all worked. But a lot of it was by Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi doesn't really get that far, but Bluetooth 5 does.
Agreed.
So I have this little slide here. So
in the ASTM, or in the means of compliance document, Bluetooth 5 is the recommended protocol because of the distance as well as integrated error checking in it. So absolutely.
So like your standard Bluetooth, I remember the day where you couldn't connect to a Bluetooth on the other side of the room, let alone a kilometer away. So this is, I was pretty shocked about this, but anyway, I guess I'm living in the old times. So your phones, if you want to use your phone to do this, so the iPhone 10s and above will do this, and most of the
iPhone 10s will receive Bluetooth 4. They will not receive Bluetooth 5. Only Android-based phones receive Bluetooth 5.
Okay, I'm more of an Android guy, so I have never tested this on an iPhone, so I'll take your word for it.
And the FAA and ASTM contacted Apple and requested a date when they would support Bluetooth 5, and they declined to ever provide a date. When you've got 60.
David, I'm really glad you're on this, because I don't even live in the iPhone world or the Mac world, so I'm kind of Linux and Android, so I'm really that's pretty entertaining input.
It is.
Yeah, so I've used this with OpenDroneID. It's been flying 400 meters in the air, so and you're getting a connection and it's showing you where it's going, so it works. So something that Android users have over iPhone users for a change. Okay, not that I'm bitter. I'm not bitter. So if you're registering a new drone, basically you go to the FAA drone zone, and it has a question now that says, does your drone broadcast FAA remote ID information? When you say yes, you're just entering what the serial number is, the remote ID number is. In some cases, it's the same as the serial number that's inside of the box, but not always. So I've already shown which ones, so you can check to see if your drone's in there. So the Mavic 2 is not in there, but it will allegedly be in there. The Mavic 2 Pros will be in there sometime this year. Some of the firmware updates are coming out in September. Some of them are more like December, but like all software companies, I guess the more hardware, but on the software side, just be prepared, because that may fall. So you might, if you need to fly it soon, you probably want to see if you can get a broadcast module so that you can make sure that you're compliant. So where do I find my remote ID? So you can find it in the DJI Fly app or the DJI Pilot app. It's in lots of different places. I have a huge FAQ that DJI put together in the forums. That's in the resources. That will tell you all the different stuff that's going on. But essentially, you just have to play around with the app to go into the about to see if you can find what the remote ID is. And also there is a little icon that will show you, I should have added it, where the remote ID is operating or not, so that you don't have to go out and see if you can catch the broadcast with one of the scanning tools.
And if you're wondering why is the remote ID serial number such a silly long number, that's specified by the FAA, and they insisted on an ANSI standard to be used. So each manufacturer declares a range of serial numbers, and the first 4 characters are specific to the manufacturer.
Okay, if you're mostly flying DJI drones, like I said, they put together this remote ID FAQ. It's pretty good, actually. Gives you a lot of information about lots of different drones as well. It's not just DJI specific. I'd recommend having a look at that. Okay, let me go back to where we were. Actually, this is a question for you, David. I'm assuming that as of the 16th, I'm going to have to go and find all the remote IDs for all the drones that I'm flying, go back into the FAA drone zone and update them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. I must have wrong on that one. If you are using a standard remote ID when you're adding a device or editing a device, then you just use the drop down to say it's a standard. If you're using the broadcast module, then basically what you're going to do is just choose the remote ID broadcast module, which you'll get from the manufacturer. So you're probably saying to yourself, what exactly is a broadcast module? So there's a bunch of them out there. This is the UVA Ionics. That's the ping RID. So this goes for about $300. They were out across the way from us at Commercial UAV last week. Great folks. I think it normally goes for $300, but if you use the promo code PINGRID, you can get it for $300. Save yourself $50. It's a huge amount of money if you're basically trying to support 50 DJI or other drones that are not standard remote ID compliant. So there's we're basically going to, for the drones that we can't fly, we're just going to wait for the updates. I don't think most of the work we're doing is on Mavic 3s, M30s, and M350s now, so I think we're probably okay, but I think that there is probably a significant group of people out there that are going to be scrambling to get these broadcast modules. We were told in lots of different places that there was quite a delay in getting them, but I'm just going to give you the ones that I've found and looked at. So basically, here's another one. This is the drone tag. So this is €299. If you're wondering how you attach it, it's just like this. Basically, you just attach it on the side. You're using Velcro. Oh, somebody's got a question. What was the discount code for UAV Onyx? I'll email it to you, Mike. I think it was PINGRID. I better check the brochure though. Okay, and here's David's one. So David's working with the file test folks, and they have this easy ID. So this is a cheaper option. So this is $100, and it's going to be on getfpv.com tomorrow. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
David?
GetFPV and Rotor Riot and Flight Test, FLITE. And I've been working with the flight test people. This is designed and made in the United States. The electronics assembly firm is Tritium Electronics, a great bunch also in Ohio. And I received will receive no compensation for the work I've done on this, but it is a Bluetooth 4 and 5 transmit. And as you might be able to make out, that's a U-Blox 8.
Yeah, it's U-Blox. Yeah.
8, yeah.
For the GPS and GNSS.
And we'll have connectivity with Betaflight.
Okay, cool.
I
was wondering what the connector was for.
Yeah, we've added a UART. That's what those little 1.27 millimeter header pins are on the left hand side of the picture.
In the notes, there's a link to the press release that talks about it. So if anybody wants to find out more, either hit up David or find the press release. So you can also get a Cube Pilot release for Pixhawk drones. This is $39. This is kind of like for people like myself and Andrew who put drones like this together. So basically, it's plugs into your Pixhawk controller, and then just remember to update the firmware. You know, it's obviously more so for the hobbyists. When we were trying to understand how to do this, I saw that there was a beta from Twilio. We used to do an awful lot of buying phone lines off Twilio for APIs and lots of different things for many of the websites that we worked on in the past, not drone related. So I noticed that I'm on all their email lists, and I noticed that they have this beta that was called a programmable asset tracker. And I said, oh, this is pretty cool. Let's see what we can do with this. We're always trying to do little pieces, little integrations or whatever, just to try and learn some more. So this is a device that makes kind of embedded programming a lot easier for people who aren't embedded programmers. This asset tracker is about $100 each, and frankly, it's just way too big for what we're trying to do. It's basically the size of a Wi-Fi book. But if we had finished, well, we did finish the programming side. So the next side after that is that you work with an OEM to try and mass produce this. So they bought a company called Electric Imp, and it's a website that you can use, which kind of does a lot for streamlining, getting from, you know, a concept in and putting it, the language is called Squirrel, which is kind of like a C language. And then you basically, as you get up to the end of the process, you can then get the OEM to slim down what you're trying to do. So this has lots of different sensors on it. So if we'd gone to the next phase, we would have been able to get a lot smaller, but frankly, we just never got there. People got busy and were off the bench. So that was the end of that. It'll do a lot more than the standard remote ID module, and it's got tons of different sensors. It would probably be something that we would return to if the network ID thing comes out, because it's Twilio, which means it'll do 5G. So and I will show where the code is and give everybody access to it afterwards. I should have probably put this a bit earlier. This is the do you need a broadcast module? So this is just showing, what I'm trying to show here is the Phantom 4 December 31st, Mavic 2 Pro, Mavic 2 Zoom, Mavic Air 2, and the FPV. So everything else is kind of what we talked about before, but like if you have a Mavic 4 Pro V1, I would not expect you to be able to get a firmware update, which means you can use the standard remote ID. Your only choice is going to be the broadcast module. So, and then it's up to you. If you have a Mavic 2 Zoom that you're using under Part 107, then you probably want to get a broadcast module to tide you over. Okay, all right. So that's the front end. So now we're sending out the signal. How do we know? You know, what's it working on the other side? Who's, you know, if the police are looking for it, how do they find it? If you're just in your back garden, you hear a drone and you want to see where it is or where the controller is, how do you actually detect it? So there's a number of apps that are already out there. First one here is Drone Scanner. I did borrow this from a YouTube link, which I have in the notes. The drone scanner is pretty cool because it will actually, if it gets the information, it will pull up where the remote controller is, as well as where the drone is. The person was complaining that the updates weren't fast enough, so it's kind of taking 40 to 50 seconds for it to be updated, which if anybody's moving, whether the drone or the controller, the remote controller, you're not going to be able to track them down. You're going to be a minute behind them. Two other ones. So there's Air Sentinel. This one does not show the controller. And then the other one is the open source ID, and I'm going to show that in a minute. So that basically gives you the Android code. We have the source code. So, and it also has, there's two parts of the source code. Okay, let me reset something.
Oh, sorry, Godfrey. I'm putting a note in there. I'll explain what that link is. Continue.
Okay, no worries. So next, okay, so let's go have a look at the code. Let me do this. Show me the code. Okay. So this is Open Drone ID. So, you know, obviously I borrowed a whole bunch of things. It's just a cell phones when looking to see what hardware could detect what signal types. Yep. So that's if you know, you're going to figure out if your phone's able to find the get the Bluetooth 5 or not. Okay, so here's where the code is. So this is cool. All right. So I wish I'd known this was here when we started to go on our escapades with the Twilio. The one that this is the code for the receiver. So that's the Open Drone ID, Android ID thing that I showed you. So this is standard Android code. We're all kind of Android programmers in the office mostly. But so it basically tells you, you know, what you got to do for your change the Gradle properties. It's a classic Android app. Doesn't look like it's using any Compose or anything, but source main. I guess the only thing I complain about is it's actually Java instead of Kotlin, but the code's there. So if you want to do your own implementation, that'd be a great place to start.
And
if you want to,
the notion that this code was written by a group of people who are the lead, the chair, and a number of members of the ASTM remote ID working group who created the means of compliance. So you can rest assured that that this is working toward listening to compliant RID signals.
Okay, and I probably should offer some help too as well, because I think we could definitely help when people come on the bench. It's probably a good open source thing to start contributing to. And then on this side, we have the transmitter Linux side. So if I go back to the list of all the different things. So this is an example on Open Drone ID Linux transmitter for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. If you look at the notes, it has the static information, but doesn't have the dynamic information. But that's definitely a good place to start. This is, basically it would work on a Linux machine. So, potentially you could have a Linux box attached to your drone, and then we could start transmitting if we have the right equipment using this code. We still need to do some work to make sure, it supports a Raspberry Pi. So ding, 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 that's all I need. So once I got a Raspberry Pi, then we're off to the races. So we can basically put the code on that and then start using that to attach the Raspberry Pi with some more Velcro, and then make sure that we're sending the static information, the dynamic information as well. And I think this is a really great start if somebody wants to make their own one, because I know you were talking about that, Rich, earlier on. So that would be my go-to. Okay. And the other one that I wanted to show you, and I just realized that this is still private, but I'll make it public right after this call. So this is using the Twilio asset tracker that I mentioned before. There are 2 files in here. The only code that we made any changes to is basically using the out-of-the-box code that we get from Twilio. But we did make quite a few changes to make sure that this worked with the remote ID spec. The agent side is going to be really useful because that's basically what works on AWS in the cloud. So then we could use that to support the network ID part of the spec. So I think that's actually something that we're definitely going to return to when that starts to bubble up over the next while. So what do we do? If you're trying to find, this works on, the chip is a ESP32. So again, if you're used to any of the small chips, like we do a lot of payload SDK work, so we're on the DJI. So the 2 choices are if you're going to go ESP32 or you're going to go Raspberry Pi. So this one works on the ESP32. That's what's in the box. So this is explaining all the different things, all the functions that were taken out, all the stuff that we've done. You're more than welcome to use this code. It is, like I said, it's written in Squirrel, but I'll show you. As you can see, the code, it's kind of C-like anyway, so it's pretty easy to pick up. It's using Electric Imp, which is this kind of workflow process engine that they have. And Twilio, of course, would be more than happy to sell you all sorts of 5G stuff if you want to make it a network. Okay, what else do I have? Go back to my slides. Okay, so resources. So lots of stuff here. So we have links to the FAA remote ID, where you're going to start. We have the OpenDroid ID receiver Android. That's the code that I just had. The FAA Gov list docs. That's where you go to check if your drone is supported or not, or whether you need a broadcast module. And then the thread, that HTML DJI. So there's a couple of I think that's the FAQ, the link that I have there, the long link with UDDS-FAA. That is a list of all the CBOs that I could find. That's up there. ASTM.org. That is the spec. That is the remote ID spec. So that there is a standard specification that you'd expect. Has a lot of network stuff in there too as well.
There's also a second spec that comprises the means of compliance, and that's F3586.
Okay.
In addition to 3411, and those are, if you guys are probably very accustomed, those are not free.
Yeah, they're not free. So I think it's about $40 each, if I'm not mistaken, something around that. So I'm not going to give that one away because that is copyrighted. And then the remote ID is the repo that I just showed you. File test is the broadcast module that David's working with. And then Open Drone ID is where we stole a lot of the images, and just it's a really good resource for the code base that we showed, plus a lot of the background information. And the only thing is, next month I'm going to be talking about PX4 simulators. Always an open invitation about if anybody else wants to partake in any of these. I'm always interested in people talking. Okay, so I'm going to stop presenting. I'm going to stop recording.